Hello, if you're watching on playback, I hope you're doing very well. Of course, I'm really having a bit of a problem with Extra right now, so that's why I'm not going to talk for too long, for more than probably 20 minutes. Um, yeah, interesting topic that came up on the race YouTube page the other day, 2 weeks ago actually. Why no F1 team wants Mick Schumacher? This is an interesting one because Mick Schumacher is obviously the son of Michael Schumacher, a 7-time world champion. Mick Schumacher won the F3 title in 2018 and the F2 title in 2020. However, it took him 2 years in both categories to be able to win both titles. And then, of course, he also spent another 2 years in Formula 4 in Germany and Italy before he entered the two big junior categories on the way to Formula 1. He also spent 2 years in Formula 1, driving for Haas, where he had an okay first season driving for the American-owned team. But, of course, despite the fact that he was significantly faster than Mazepin, he had a lot of big crashes, which obviously made Gunther not very happy. And then, obviously, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict occurring, Kevin Magnussen replaced Mazepin with just a couple of weeks to go before the start of the 2022 F1 season. And straight away, Kevin Magnussen qualified the car in 6th place and put a lot of pressure on Mick because, let's face it, I do think, obviously, from that point onwards, Mick began to overcommit when he realised what he needed to improve upon. Mick gets overheated at times, I feel. I think there could be some truth to that, but it has to be said, his junior record is a bit... It's not horribly bad, but it's not exactly super impressive when you consider he spent about 4 years in F2 and F3. Obviously, it's better than someone like Zhou Guan Yu and probably slightly better than someone like Logan Sargeant, but the problem with Formula 1 is that we're now beginning to enter a period where there are a lot of decent young kids coming through. Oh, yeah, some of the stupid pet names Mick has had, like Mick's surname and, I don't know, PR Mick or something. I think a lot of it is down to the fact that it's down to the fact that people resent him for the status he has for having his dad as his father, obviously 7-time world champion. It doesn't really get any bigger than that. It's a bit like Dale Earnhardt Jr. in NASCAR because of who his dad was. So naturally, a lot of people in America would say some pretty nasty things towards Dale Jr. when he first entered NASCAR. But the problem with Mick is that the crashes he had really, really were a problem for Gene Haas and, of course, Gunther Steiner, because with the new budget cap, like, you can't afford to be having a driver who crashes out a lot. And of course, with the extended calendar, it's like, Mick, the problem with Mick is that, yeah, I know he did start to outpace Kevin Magnussen in the second half of the year, but the problem was the car kind of lost a bit of speed during 2022. So when Mick did beat Kevin, it was a bit too late, because by that point, the Haas were not really able to score many points when I think Aston Martin began to improve their machinery, with Vettel getting points and even Stroll getting a couple of points here and there. the thing with Mick Schumacher is that, and I really hate to say this, but I do think having his dad name did help him quite a fair bit on the road to F1, getting, I don't know, being able to drive for Premier as long as he did, because he looked okay in German Formula 4, but I do think a lot of the marketing side did kind of help Mick along the way, because in terms of Mick's overall racecraft, I can't say it's like the best I've ever seen from like the youngsters in the junior categories and the rookies in F1. I mean, I'm not saying that he's anywhere near as bad as Zhou or Sargeant or Latifi or Mazepin, obviously, but in F1, you don't get a lot of time to impress. Like, Jean-Éric Vergne only had about 3 years at Toro Rosso. I mean, the thing with Jean-Éric Vergne is that he just wasn't quick enough. Baku 2022, yeah, but I think obviously, like, I think in Gunther's mind, he just sat there for, well, he's up. I mean, Mick already had about over a year at the team, and considering Mick was comfortably quicker than Mazepin, I think Mick Steiner just thought, well, if you're really good enough, you should be able to get up to speed with someone like Kevin Magnussen, who we all know hasn't got the cleanest racecraft and can be beatable at times. And I think Mick was a bit caught flat-footed by Kevin early on in 2022, and it's just, I think the problem is that Gunther did say that when Mick tried to push, he ended up crashing the car, and of course that crash at Monaco, I actually think that was the incident that caused Gunther to kick Mick out at the end of the year, because I mean the amount of damage he did to the car at Monaco was, I have to say, it was quite severe, and I think already like Gunther, that really did wind Gunther up. It's really unfortunate, but I mean, the thing is, I personally have criticised the likes of Grosjean, Vettel for crashing out a lot. And, you know, if we're going to come out here and criticise Gasly and Albon for making infractions for track limits, I mean, this is the thing. The fact of the matter is, most drivers don't get a lot of time to impress in Formula 1. And the problem is that I think we have to realise, unfortunately, that I think trying to judge Mick can be quite difficult, because I know some people obviously were massive fans of his dad, which, oh yeah, Mick didn't even start the race at Saudi Arabia because of the crash in qualifying, which, I'm sorry, that's really quite unacceptable. If his name was like Mick Jones, I think a lot of people would have really criticised him quite badly. I mean, this is a problem. Like, we're giving a lot. I mean, we're giving drivers like Albon, Gasly, Vettel, Grosjean stick for getting involved in this incident. I mean, the other thing with Haas is obviously, I think halfway through the year, they also started talking to Nico Hulkenberg, and I think Nico Hulkenberg, made it very obvious that he knew that if he ever wanted to return with F1, he had to make it as soon, pretty much for 2023, because he couldn't afford to spend any more than 3 years out of the sport. And unfortunately, Mick ended up having to become the sacrificial lamb, because let's face it, Haas have maximised their results a lot more since Hulkenberg has come in. It's kind of brutal to say it. Some may say that obviously by Nico Hulkenberg being the faster driver, they've made him the number one, and now Kevin's become the number two, and as a result, Hulkenberg gets the better upgraded parts. Kevin doesn't. I mean, beforehand, you could argue Kevin was getting the better upgrades than Mick. It swings and roundabouts. I mean, the problem is, it's like, I know there's a lot of people saying rumours that Mick could have replaced Ocon at Alpine. Mick could have, I don't know, maybe taken a seat at Alfa Romeo, or possibly RB, with obviously Nick De Vries and Ricciardo struggling. But the thing is, it's kind of quite telling that Total Wolf has been going around trying to advertise Mick Schumacher's services since taking him on as a reserve driver at the start of 2023, and yet Total is going to be replacing Lewis Hamilton with Andrea Kimi Antonelli for next season at Mercedes, which I have to say that is not a vote of confidence. That is frankly proof that Total Wolf knows that Mick Schumacher is not particularly special, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, obviously, if Mick was any good, he would have never become a reserve driver, but I think the way Mick's uncle Ralph and his Bob Carina have gone around trying to defend him to the absolute hilt has been a bit too much, if I'm going to be honest. Didn't Jos want to sign Schumacher if Sargeant didn't get enough super license points? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think it is pretty telling that, if Mick really was rated high enough by the team bosses, I think Mick might have got the seat at Williams for 23. And maybe Sargeant would have had to wait for 2024 to see who would have come out on top in the Alba versus Mick Schumacher battle, I presume. Obviously, had Mick got the seat for 2023, then we probably would have ended up seeing Sargeant replace either one of Albon or Mick Schumacher. But, I think with Alex Albon improving so much in 2023, I think obviously that killed off Schumacher. Well, a possible seat Schumacher could have had for this year or next year. And I think Tsunoda's improvements has also kind of put another nail in the coffin of Mick Schumacher's F1 career. Yeah, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like, I know there were lots of rumours about Mick going to Williams, but it never seemed very likely because you have to realise Logan Sargeant was a member of the Williams Junior Academy, so it's not really like, I think with Mick Schumacher, they're going to drive for Alpine's hypercar program this year in WEC, and the fact that now it's been over 18 months since Mick has raced in Formula One, it's not very likely young drivers who take a 2-year break from the sport and suddenly come back unless there's obviously like some dramatic driver market change or something. And I think, Mick, with a drive in Alpine in the hypercar program, I think that's about as good as it gets for Mick. I mean, I think obviously Formula E teams will probably take an interest in Mick at some point. Maybe could take the Schumacher name to IndyCar in America. Oh yeah, I think Nick de Vries. I think Nick de Vries did have a contract offer for Williams for last season, but for some daft reason, obviously he obviously took one look at Red Bull, noticed that Sergio Perez was getting criticised for failing to beat Charles Leclerc for second place in the Drivers' Championship, and thought, oh yeah, I've got a chance of getting a Red Bull seat, which was always going to be a tall order, and considering he did pretty well at Monza against Latifi in his Grand Prix debut for Williams, I have to say, yeah, Nick made a monumental error choosing AlphaTauri over Williams, because I think he could have been fairly close to Alex Albon, but yeah, I mean, but I think the problem with going to Williams is that I think the Vries just thought that if he went to Williams, it would have been a potential career dead end. Like, he would have thought, well, would Total Wolf be interested in me if I went to Williams? How likely would it be that I'd beat Albon? Because I think in Nick's head, he probably thought it'd be much easier to beat Yuki Tsunoda over Albon, because I know he did say at the start of 2023 that he saw himself as being a better driver than Yuki, only for Yuki to then completely steamroll him. And unfortunately, I think Nick de Vries paid a price for his hubris. And of course, I think he did believe that AlphaTauri would have a competitive car in 2023, which is obviously another thing in itself. Like, problem is, AlphaTauri's car was okay. I think it was probably like 7th or 8th fastest, but the thing is, I mean, Liam Lawson was fairly decent when he replaced De Vries for a couple of races, and it wasn't De Vries, it was Ricciardo replaced, because obviously Ricciardo injured his wrist at Zandvoort. But I do think that apparently Red Bull are not exactly fans of Lawson's attitude. I have looked at a poll, and it does say that, well, 80% have voted against Mick being good enough for Formula One, which I have to say, I do kind of think that there isn't really a particularly strong case for Mick, anyone really advocating Mick's return to F1. I mean, I know people would sit there and be quite childish and rude towards Mick, calling him Mick's surname on social media, but this is not the first time we've seen the son of a former world champion get opportunities that others believe he didn't really deserve. Nelson Piquet Jr., I have to say, was definitely one of them. And of course, we all know he caused the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix crash, which brought the safety car out and was a huge, created an opportunity for Alonso to end up winning the race, when of course Rosberg was forced to serve the drive-through penalty. AlphaTauri's car got better from Singapore onwards, yeah, but I think that's a case of too little too late for Nick de Vries, I'm afraid. And I know some people said that Mick should have got the AlphaTauri seat, but I think Yuki Tsunoda definitely deserves a bit of respect for what he's done, to be honest, destroying de Vries and being pretty much on top of Ricciardo. So I don't think Schumacher would have fared that well against Yuki Tsunoda, and to be honest, I'm not that sure he would have done that well against Albon. It's like, because when you consider how much Magnussen has struggled against Hulkenberg, it's just Schumacher's rating has definitely dropped. Like, yeah, like for me, 2022 completely damaged Schumacher's reputation with far too many crashes and being beaten horribly in the first half of 2022 by Magnussen, who I think Magnussen is definitely on his way out of F1, because I think Magnussen has mentally checked out and he just simply isn't quick enough compared to Hulkenberg. Like, I think Hulkenberg has proven that Haas have not really ever had like anything resembling a top driver until, of course, he came along. I think Hulkenberg has got to be the best driver Haas have ever had in their 8-year history of F1. And, I mean, I know I've seen many graphs and charts saying, Hulkenberg over Magnussen, Magnussen over Schumacher, and Schumacher over Mazepin. It's like a food chain, and it's like, yeah, I can't even disagree with that, because unfortunately, it just seems quite logical to rate him like that. And, well, I've got 8 votes, and oh dear, yeah, Tyre Silverback, I hope you're doing well this evening. I mean, I'm trying to think who else. What other sons of former drivers have struggled like? I mean, let's be honest. Nelson Piquet Jr., that's one. Trying to think. Well, I mean, Pedro Fittipaldi is I think it's either nephew or great nephew of Emerson Fittipaldi. I can't remember. It's all very complicated. I know Christian Fittipaldi is the son of Wilson and the nephew of Emerson, but he only had a midfield career for Minardi and work in the early 90s, I beg your pardon. Oh yeah, Kazuki Nakajima was pretty awful. Like, but then again, his dad, Satoru Nakajima, also struggled in the late 80s compared to Senna. Yeah, but the thing with Lando is that he made his debut when he was 19 years old at the start of 2019. Like, Lando had an amazing junior career, by the way. Like, winning Formula 3. I think he also won a Formula Renault, I think. And then, of course, he finished second to George Russell in the 2018 Formula 2 season. I wouldn't go that far to say Zhou is a better driver than Mick. I think that's a bit over the top. I really disagree with that because I think Zhou has been very much had the been a beneficiary of having to drive alongside an old and tired Bottas. And I think obviously with Sauber is that whilst I think they definitely have had the worst car this year, I think back in 2022 they probably should have sealed sixth place by like a larger points margin than what was then finishing on exactly the same points as Aston Martin. Joe keeps out of the war, yeah, but that's not. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what's the point of being an F1 driver if you just keep it in between the white lines all the time? If like, yeah, you know, you can always be a consistent point scorer, but the thing is, though, like, unless you're as good as Jenson Button, where like you know how to score podiums or score a lot of points on a consistent basis, unless you actually have a bit of speed to go with your ability to keep the cars out of the barriers, it's sort of always a little bit too cautious for my taste. Like, I know, like, apart from 2023 Hungary, like, Joe has been a fairly safe pair of hands, but I've never been, like, super impressed by Joe in any sort of way. Like, I always feel like there's always at least another 10th or 2 left in reserve, but he's never used it. And in the races, he's always sitting there waiting for someone to run into trouble. But that strategy only really makes sense if you're like a driver in your mid to late 30s or late early 40s, like a Kimi or a Fernando Alonso, where like you know you have like a good idea of how the cars will fluctuate throughout a race and their race pace. Oh yeah, Joe. Okay, yeah, Joe had an accident at Saudi, but I think apart from that, it's really rare that Joe's been in trouble. But the problem with Joe is that he does drive like a classic pay driver in that he's under strict instructions to make sure he brings the car home. You know, not only does he give over his sponsors' money, but he's also been instructed to keep the car in between the two white lines and not really cause the team any headaches, because I have to say, with the fact that he's not exactly had like not many points, the fact that he's been given all the car parts and that his car's like 3, 4, 5 races older than Bottas in terms of his spec. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of almost like, but at the same time, like, if all your job is just to keep your car on the road, like Gaston Mazzacane back in for Minardi back in 2000, as a fan of the sport, I can't get excited about you. I just can't get excited. It's just like, yeah, you're a pay driver. And that's not me saying it in an insulting way. That's just me saying it in a way of, you are what you are. You are just there to be a safe pair of hands, keep everything neat and tidy, make life easy. All right, Michael Andretti made his son pay to drive. Oh, yeah, Michael Andretti had to pay to drive, yeah. But I think the thing with Michael Andretti is that he's now like, what, 36, 37 now? Like, I know obviously he's had to do it for like the past 2 years, but I mean, the thing is, though, with Marco is that his performance has dropped off so much in the last 7 or 8 years of his career that I think his dad was absolutely spot on to make his son pay for his seat, because, like, his son can afford to pay for his seat. And I think his dad is just like, you're no longer a promising talent. You're no longer 19 years old. It's not, like, you're just not going to do it. Like, I mean, I think in many ways, I think at some point Michael will probably turn around and refuse to give his son a seat, even no matter how much money his son pays him. I think eventually he'll get to the point where Michael just simply will refuse any amount of money from his son Marco to buy a seat, and I think Marco will just be forced to. I think at some point we'll probably do one more Indy 500, and his dad will like, yeah, this is the last time he's gonna race for me. Like, if he wants to race, like, he's gonna have to go and buy a seat elsewhere. Joe's never finished higher than ninth for the road. Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's the thing. Like, what's the point of being a Formula One driver if all you're ever gonna do is just keep it in between the two white lines? Like, it only makes sense when you get older, like Kimi Räikkönen, where obviously you don't have any ambitions of ever winning another championship, fighting for wins ever again, and just doing a job for the team, like you see with Kimi and Bottas. But with Joe, like, he's 25 years old. You want to see a bit more ambition and a bit more aggression, but it's like, what's the point of being in F1 if you're just going to drive around like that? Like, unless he thinks that you might get like a decent seat in sports cars or maybe IndyCar racing because of how he's driving in F1, then all power to him. But to be honest, I don't think any IndyCar teams or sports car teams are that keen on having someone like Joe around, because he was clearly never one of the elite talents in junior Formula racing. So I don't get it. Like, at this point, I think even if Joe can find the money to find another seat in F1 next year, which, I mean, there's only one seat left. I know that's obviously the Sauber second seat, so I don't think what's in the team are that interested in him. But even if he could find the money to find a reserve seat, then I have to ask Joe, what is he doing with his whole racing career at this point? It's like, there's more to motor racing than just Formula One. Oh, right, because Joe's really got a motorsport manager. Well, by the way, I was also quite critical of Joe in 2022. Yeah, but the thing with Joe is that it just feels like this guy is just, I don't know, he just seems to be in like one of those people who has had an opportunity to race in a motor racing series. Extremely few people, let alone very few racing drivers alone, ever get to compete in, but now he's just sort of drifting around into boredom. Oh my God, why? Oh yeah, Joe celebrated 14th in China. Obviously, I know it was his home race, but I do think he was forced to celebrate in front of the fans for the sake of the sponsors, just to say, oh yeah, I'm grateful for the support, which, okay, fair enough, but we have to realise I think he was having to fake that emotion. Oh yeah, there's always been like loads of Joe Guan Yu fanboys and fangirls. I don't get it. It's like, I don't know. Is it because of the sort of social media posts where he's wearing like a beanie hat or something and he wears these chick clothes? Like, I mean, it's like, I don't get it. Is it because of his social media? Because it does seem to be Joe has courted a bit of popularity on social media, but I don't think that's the reason why a driver should really gain popularity, to be honest. Like, it should, you driving on the track should do the talking for you, like it did with Kimi, or I don't know, any other drivers in the past, like Mika Hakkinen. I mean, Chaz, for me, I have to say, I'm trying to remember, where did I rank everyone in 2022? This is a hard one because who finished last? Was he? Well, I mean, I think I ranked Latifi last because he ended up getting released at the end of the year. I can't really remember, but such a tricky one. I think Mick Schumacher might have been third to last or somewhere around there. I can't remember where I ranked everyone. It's so hard, to be honest. It's like, I know Pierre Gasly had a difficult season, but I don't think I ranked him that low. Oh no. But yeah, I think 19th for Zhou is actually surprisingly fair enough. I think that's actually where I ranked him because obviously Bottas got 49 points and Zhou only scored 6 points in a car that ended up finishing 6th in the constructor standings, which is that's quite frighteningly poor for Zhou, I'm afraid. Even though he was a rookie, granted, yes, but even so, like, it just felt like this guy was being far too careful. I know, obviously, his car broke down at Baku when he was running 8th, and I think he also broke down in another race where he was also running 9th or 10th, so he had about 6 points taken off him due to no fault of his own, but even so, like, he should have been, like, at that point, he should have been fighting for points far more often, but it did seem a bit similar to Mick Schumacher's 2022, where just like Mick started to gain a bit of speed late on in the season, Zhou started to outpace Bottas late on when both the Haas and the Alfa Romeo were no longer that particularly quick. Ricciardo, oh yeah, I remember now. Yeah, Ricciardo was my worst driver. Like, I actually ranked him last, and Latifi got second to last. So I think Zhou finished like 18th for my list. Well, I mean, this is the thing with Stroll is that the only reason why you could argue Stroll is going to look down on a bit more favourably is mostly because we've had so many terrible pay drivers in recent years. Zhou, Latifi, Mazepin, and then of course we've had someone like Sargeant struggle. But really, none of those drivers are even remotely that impressive because I will say this, like, if they were trying to enter Formula One 10 to 15 years ago, I think the only way they could have done it is to really ramp up the amount of sponsorship they had with them. I think, but I think they would have been laughed off because I know there's been like a few like certain P drivers that have tried to get in the sport, like Alfonso Chelis Jr. from Mexico, Johnny Cocotto Jr., the son of a Venezuelan racer named Johnny Cocotto Sr., who was once Ayrton Senna's teammate. And then, of course, there was that Sergio Canamassas guy who had quite a bit of money. And, of course, we've got Roy Nissany, who is absolutely loaded. But thankfully, due to the poor performances they've put in Formula 2, the FIA super license bars them and prohibits them from entering the sport. Quing Harmar, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Quing Harmar, yeah, he ended up doing Formula E and he was absolutely useless. He also was, I think he was one of the backmarkers in Formula 2 as well. Thankfully, due to how strict the Formula 1 super license is, due to the fact that obviously we had the likes of John Dennis Denatras and Giovanni Lavardi stinking out the place in the mid-90s for the likes of Minardi, LaRousse, and of course the infamous Pacific team, the FIA turned around and said, right, we've got to have a rule that says a driver can only qualify for a race if their lap time is within 107% of the pole sitter's lap time. So let's just say like you do a pole lap of 1 minute 40 at Spa-Francorchamps. You cannot be any more than 7 seconds slower than the pole sitter at Spa, otherwise you're not qualifying. Ricciardo Rossi, oh my goodness me, he was a proper stinker. Like, he made even skunks started to vomit because of how stinky he was at Tyrrell. No, I'm not joking. In 2022, I actually put Daniel Ricciardo last place because I was just completely disgusted at how bad Ricciardo was in his second year at McLaren. Like, you know, all the PR teams from McLaren said 2021 was just a case of Ricciardo entering a new team. He couldn't adapt to the car. He can't adapt to the brakes, the steering. These new regulations will mean it's going to be a reset for Ricciardo. And then, of course, because of the fact that the Pirelli then decided to change the front tyres to a weaker specification, then, of course, Ricciardo couldn't get his head around that, so it all came to naught. I don't know why Mick wants to go back to F1, but he's doing well in sports car. Yeah, hello there, Francesco Beta. Like, I've not seen you in quite a few years, actually. I think the last time I remember seeing you comment on my channel was actually 3 or 4 years ago. Of course, I know I talked to you on Chazza HD's channel. I hope you're doing well. Of course, let me look at my poll. Yeah, no one's convinced by Mick Schumacher, I'm afraid. It's like a case of too little too late. You know, if I was Mick Schumacher, I would happily stay in sports car racing because, you know, you get a nice, reliable salary in sports car racing. Like, if you become like a reliable driver in that series, you can have a seat there for like well over a decade or so, be able to have like a reliable salary, like not have to worry about job security like you do in Formula One, and obviously it's to some extent some series like IndyCar racing due to the fact that the teams are often needing drivers to carry money with them because of how expensive those series are. Whilst, of course, in the top level of sports car racing, the manufacturers pay everything up front out of their own pocket. Brundle said he should stay in F1, but keeps getting drawn back to Formula One. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I think Brendan Hartley was like doing very well in sports car racing, but obviously the opportunity of going to Formula One allured him, and sadly he struggled in his year at Toro Rosso. But I mean, ultimately, it is pretty much on top of every racing driver's bucket list to do Formula One at some point in their careers, because you never know. Like, you could end up in like the same situation as Franco Colapinto, where you jump into the car and you're quick straight away, and all of a sudden you're the talk of the town. I mean, yeah, I mean, Latifi was fantastic at the 2022 British Grand Prix. Like, he was actually really good at points. I was like, Latifi's in the points today. Obviously, he finished 12th on the road, but Japan, he also then actually scored 2 points for 9th place in the race, I think. I don't know what happened to Albon, but I think Albon had a problem, and then Latifi took advantage and scored points out of nowhere and ended up scoring half the points that Albon scored for the year. So I actually thought, yeah, I know Latifi is not particularly talented, but he does have a habit of occasionally scoring a couple of points here and there. I mean, Latifi, I think, you know, I don't think Latifi was as bad as what people said he was. Like, you know, we see lots of memes of Latifi still to this day, but he was actually okay considering he was always just a pay driver who was paying for his seat. But yeah, I think the fact he scored points would, I think, was seen as being a bonus by the Williams team, in that they thought, oh, he got a 7th place at Hungary in 2021. He then scored another point at the Belgian Grand Prix due to the race being basically cancelled. But of course, they had to, because they wanted to declare an official result, all the cars were sent out to go around behind the safety car for a lap, and to see if he got points out of it. Oh my God, yeah, I think there were a couple of races. Ricciardo was racing Latifi. Oh yeah, Ricciardo got stuck behind Kimi Räikkönen at the 2021 Monaco Grand Prix. And Kimi was stuck behind Giovinazzi, but still. And then, of course, Ricciardo got lapped by Norris. Lapped in the process. Just a truly disastrous end. Oh my God, Ricciardo's McLaren stint was just beyond a horrific disaster. Spare for that victory at Monza, but I think even at Monza, I think Norris was closing down on him in the last few laps, and I think Norris was actually going a lot quicker than Ricciardo. Red Bull are now keeping an eye on Russell. Yes, I know that, because apparently there are rumours that Max Verstappen wants to go to Mercedes, or if he can't get a seat at Mercedes, then he might decide to take a break from Formula One, because let's be real, I mean, Red Bull are going down the garbage much quicker than Man United's fortunes have been dipping recently. Yeah, I think obviously Vettel was so unlucky in the second half of 2022, but I think Vettel had mentally checked out the team, and let's be honest, I think Vettel was just driving for fun at that point, which is because let's be honest, I think even though Alonso had an outstanding start to 2023 with the podiums he got, I think Vettel still is fairly content with his decision to retire from Formula One. I hope you're doing well, Rotten Steam, I beg your pardon, but I mean, the problem with Ricciardo is that I think he lost confidence in himself and his ability to like extract what he can from the McLaren. Like, I think he just looked over to the other side of the garage and he was just gobsmacked at how quick Norris could be in a fairly difficult car to drive with a unique driving style required for, in order to be able to control the car. How to, Norris could brake late and then pick up the acceleration very early on the exit of the corner. I mean, yeah, there was almost night and day between Norris and Ricciardo at times. I think the gap in qualifying was about half a second a lap, which is honestly, when I saw Ricciardo struggle earlier at McLaren, I was like, oh my God, I think Ricciardo might be in trouble here because there's no way in hell Ricciardo really should be struggling that much. And I think, yeah, Ricciardo, I think when he entered McLaren, I think he was already beginning to go past his best. And I just think when he realised he couldn't keep up with Norris, I think that's when he mentally threw the towel in because he just realised, he's in his 30s and he's just sort of happy to take his paycheck. What was that joke I made about Ricciardo at Silverstone? I don't even remember what I said. Like, what did I say? Can someone... Ricciardo... I didn't... Like, I didn't say what you think I said, okay? Don't please. Yeah, I think you know what it was. That Monaco performance was a very classic case of the writing is on the wall for Ricciardo. Like, he got lapped by Norris, and he just simply couldn't find a way past Kimi Raikkonen in an Alfa Romeo. An aging Kimi Raikkonen driving a terrible Alfa Romeo, which, yeah, that's just... Yeah, problem with Ricciardo is that I can't believe we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo yet again for the third day in a row, but I will always maintain this till the day I die in that Ricciardo should have never left Red Bull. I know the team were obviously naturally gravitating towards Max, but the sign, it was obvious that Red Bull were gravitating towards Max Verstappen back in 2016 when, I mean, if you put an 18-year-old in your car and you've got a race-winning team, then it's pretty obvious that kid is pretty special. And he made his debut at 17 years old, and he could have finished 6th in 2015 Australia, Max Verstappen. I mean, yeah, Ricciardo used to be really exciting to watch, like, but I think going to Renault and McLaren kind of showed that he's a bit limited technically, if I'm going to be honest. Like, he's not, I know he's kind of admitted openly he's not that interested in the technical side of the sport. He just wants to jump in the car and drive wring the neck out of the car. So, I think he wasn't really prepared to grind and understand the car like other drivers would, like Max Verstappen. I mean, Bottas, I kind of knew Bottas would never become a champion, to be honest, because I never saw him do any big overtaking maneuvers at Williams. It's like, for me, it was so obvious when Mercedes signed him that they were signing a safe pair of hands. It's like, you have to realise it's like, obviously, Danny Kvyat. Oh, that's an interesting one. That's a really interesting one, Danny Kvyat. When Danny Kvyat first came to Formula One, I know he was outscored by John-Eric Verne, but there were signs that Danny Kvyat was actually really quick. But the problem with Kvyat is that he always seemed to have some really poor racecraft in him. And when he went to Red Bull, I know we technically outscored Ricciardo, but that was partly due to mechanical issues with Ricciardo, and I don't know, it just seemed like Kvyat was always intimidated by the being put in a spotlight at Red Bull, and unfortunately, getting involved in those crashes at China and Russia in 2016 totally destroyed his reputation, and it ruined his confidence in the most horrible way imaginable. And like, I don't think, like, even though I think in terms of talent, Kvyat was neck and neck with someone like Carlos Sainz, it was like Kvyat just couldn't pick his head up after he was forced to go back to Toro Rosso, and it just sort of, I mean, after that, he just became like a team player at Toro Rosso. I don't know why anyone thought Bottas was really a championship contender at any point in his time. Mercedes, like, not even at the first 4 or 5 races in 2019 was I even trying to delude myself into thinking Bottas, I beg your pardon, was a championship contender. But although I did try and delude myself that Perez was a championship contender last year, right up until he got overtaken with 5 laps to go at Miami, and then I was like, yeah, no, you're deluded. Almost a week post-race, no Ricciardo news. I might buy into the weird rumour that Christian wants Daniel to stay and Herbert wants him gone. Oh yeah, I think there's definitely a battle going on between Horner and Marco over the future of Ricciardo, because I think some people at Red Bull definitely want Perez out of the team, because also you have to remember there's also the problem they've got with Max Verstappen, who might actually go and join Mercedes in 2026. Oh yeah, I know Kvyat had a crash back in like 2015, was it, for Red Bull, which I don't think that was the moment Kvyat went off the rails, but I think that when he went off the rails, I think that was the start of 2016 when he hit Vettel and Raikkonen at China, and then of course he crashed into Vettel yet again at Russia. But I mean, the problem is that Perez, I mean, he started last year so well, but then obviously after Verstappen was forced to start 9th to some penalty, and Perez was starting on the front row of the grid, I thought Perez is bound to win this race surely, because he's driving well, he's on form, he's won at Baku and he's won at Saudi. And then Max went and overtook him with 5 laps to go. I think drove through the field so well, and I mean, that's just so unfortunate, because that was the moment I think Perez's confidence took a massive knock. I think Perez just kind of gradually started mentally checking out, and then of course he started having handling issues with the car, where he started crashing out in qualifying, and then of course the team just decided to ignore his advice on car issues, because they thought, well, you know, we've got Max Verstappen going on a 10 race winning run, so like, why do we need to listen to Perez? Like, he's just a pay driver. Hamilton didn't perform that way in Bottas's wins. That's an interesting one, because I do remember, was it Hamilton had car damage at the 2019 Australian Grand Prix, and then he also picked up a double time penalty at the 2020 Russian Grand Prix. So, I mean, I think Hamilton was unlucky in 2019 Australia, but he was a complete moron for trying to do practice starts when the steward said he couldn't at 2020 Russia, and then of course he picked up another penalty for something quite daft as well. Well, I mean, the thing with Bottas is that he was always rescued by the fact that he was a decent qualifier at the very minimum, which obviously meant that he was more or less guaranteed to finish on the podium a lot. But I am trying to talk about Mick Schumacher, and I don't know, like, I saw a video by the race a couple of weeks ago saying why no teams want Mick Schumacher, and it was basically like, he's just, that second year at Haas completely destroyed Mick's reputation altogether. Like, no team wants a driver who has a habit of crashing out unnecessarily, just and cannot really control a corner limit. I know Hamilton had a poor start at Australia 2019, but I do think he did have a brief collision with a car or accidentally picked up damage from someone else's accident with like a piece of debris damaged his floor or something, and that just sort of meant Hamilton decided to back off and allow Bottas to win by like 20 seconds because Hamilton thought, it's the first race out of a 21 race season or whatever it was at the time. I can't remember, but I think Hamilton just decided he'd be better off not putting his car in danger and then potentially writing it off and then having to do like extensive car repairs for no reason so early on in the season. Yeah, I know Rosberg absolutely went hell for leather, like, in order to win that 2016 World Championship. I think he always talks about the fact that he's changed his exercise routine from, cycling to exercising on a treadmill, which meant he could lose a kilo off his leg muscles, which allowed him obviously to lose a bit of weight, which obviously made a difference to him getting pole position at the Japanese Grand Prix in 2016, where he picked up his final F1 victory. Canada 2019. Oh, yeah, 2019. I think that was the race where it became really obvious that Bottas, finished 50 seconds behind Hamilton and Vettel that race. Like, but to be honest, I'd already given up hope like after Spain because I think he's finished like 15 seconds behind Hamilton in that race alone. But at Canada, that was practically confirmation that there was no real championship fight going on at all. To finish nearly a minute behind the race winners is quite frightening in a car as quick as a W10. Yeah, I mean, the thing with Bottas is that I think Bottas does have a few bogey tracks throughout his career, like Canada and can't remember. Yeah, I mean, well, thankfully, well, the thing is, I think ever since Kimi Raikkonen left F1 at the end, not left F1, but left Ferrari at the end of 2018, I could sort of begin to curb my own personal fanboyism because I just realised that Kimi was just going to Sauber for his last paycheck, and it wasn't exactly like worth my personal putting my own personal well-being at a huge cost just to be like begging Sauber to try and give Kimi a race-winning car or anything ludicrous. I mean, I try and stay away from fanboyism. I mean, obviously, I think with Kimi Raikkonen, it was mostly only between like 2003 and 2008-ish, where I thought he was like outstandingly good. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is that I think I've had brief periods of supporting Giancarlo Fisichella and Mark Webber, but obviously, when it all went wrong for them, I just bit the dust, and I was just like, yeah. That's about it. That they've hit their limit. I mean, there's no point me sitting here saying like getting really upset because a certain driver got unlucky with a strategy problem or having a tyre blowout or something daft, and then blaming the FIA, blaming another driver. It's like, it's racing. These sort of things always happen. Like, when you watch the sport for a fairly quite a long time, you will realise that every driver will get unlucky at some point, and there always will be some bizarre decision that goes against a driver if they've been in the sport for at least a decade or so. And then, of course, we have to realise Hulkenberg holds the record for the most starts without a podium, which is, I mean, I really do pity people who are like hardcore Hulkenberg fans, because I don't even know whether he can be like that much of a hardcore Hulkenberg fan, because I think deep down they know that he might end his career with no podiums to his name. And of course, he's going to be joining Sauber next year. So, unfortunately, it's like there's not really like much opportunity for Hulkenberg. He's 37 years old. He's probably only going to be at Sauber for like, I don't know, 2-3 years. And then he'll probably quit by the time he's 40. Oh yeah, Bottas got overtaken by Palmer, who of course got told that he was going to be leaving Renault at the end of 2017 by an email, no less. Great man management there by the team and Zhou boys. Even in 2004, in that horrible McLaren, Kimi pulled some great races. Yeah, Belgium, Silverstone. Yeah, Kimi. I mean, to be fair, I think pit strategy costed Kimi the chance of winning the Chinese Grand Prix, where he was in second place, and then he dropped behind Jenson Button. So, you know, I think after a while, I just became numb to everything that went wrong for Kimi, because I just began to accept that Kimi wasn't going to win a championship at McLaren. Like, I think eventually you have to accept reality and just realise some things are just not meant to be. You know, I think John and Lacey fans had to accept that all he was going to get was just a solitary race win at the Scuderia. And I think Lacey is also a massive anomaly in that he only had one race win, but he had like a massive number of like podiums in proportion to his race win. Well, I think he had like 20 odd podiums in his career, but yeah, he only actually stood on the top step once. Ben Hocking, 2005. Yeah, I know people still talk about 2005 because obviously that was the first of Alonso's championship, but it was also a year Kimi had 4 grid penalties due to engine changes. So yeah, really unlucky. At least he was great in the rain, but even so, he did lose the 1995 European Grand Prix at Nürburgring, where Michael Schumacher closed a 40-second gap to Lacey that race in the last 20-odd laps in what was one of Schumacher's greatest ever drives, where he pushed the absolute limits of his Benetton, and if I'm going to be honest, he actually humiliated John and Lacey in that race, considering it was a wet race, and Schumacher actually got involved in a collision with someone or another. I think maybe Damon Hill, but Schumacher, after an early pit stop, pushed the limit and then absolutely came out on top with a couple of laps to go. I mean, I will say though, like, I know I've criticised a lot of drivers, but I think having watched Formula 1 between 2006 and 2016, that was probably one of the most stacked fields of driver I think F1 has ever seen. And I think, like, we didn't have like any particularly bad paid drivers appear, apart from maybe except, I don't know, Karen Chanduk for about 10 races, Max Chilton for a while, Jody Palmer, but even those drivers were not like horrifically bad like I've seen previously or subsequently afterwards, like I've seen with Yuji ID at the start of 2006, Alex Young, Gaston Mazzacani in the early 2000s, and then of course since then we've had so many paid drivers embarrass themselves since 2017, and of course Aston Martin is owned by the driver's father. So yeah, the thing is, I mean, everyone kept saying that the moment Michael Schumacher quits Formula 1, that's when Formula 1 is going to become exciting again. And between 2007 and 2012, I think that was definitely the case. Like, the field definitely did close up with no particularly dominant driver at the front. I mean, the only thing that kept Vettel at the front was because of the fact that Vettel, Red Bull had a car designed by Adrian Newey that maximized the 2009 regs, and Vettel took full advantage of it. But even then, there were like a few races with like mechanical issues, and I think in the first half of 2012, obviously, with a blow diffuser banned, I think Red Bull struggled for a bit, and Vettel really did have a hard time driving without the blow diffuser blowing air over the rear wing, which improved the rear end grip. And Mark Webber was actually on top in the first half of 2012, winning races at Britain and Monaco. Of course, it turned out to be those were the final two wins of Mark's illustrious F1 career. I mean, 5 champions in 5 years. What? Oh my word! My goodness me! I think the last time F1 had that much competitiveness at the front of the field was probably like 1977 till about 1982, where I think it was 77 Lauda, 78 Andretti, 79 Scheckter, 80 Alan Jones, 81 PK, and then of course 1982 Keke Rosberg. And that was also a period when F1 had a really stacked field with like Peroni, Gilles Villeneuve, Jacques Lafitte, Patrick Tambay, and a couple of other decent names around like Carlos Reutemann, Ronnie Peterson, who was tragically killed at Monza, to name Redianu, John Jabri, just some really, really quite talented drivers who, some of them, I think also Patrick Depailler got killed in an accident at Hockenheim in a testing crash for Alfa Romeo. Yeah, so I mean, in many ways, I feel very lucky as an F1 fan. I got to see some of the most competitive seasons the sport has ever witnessed between like 2006 to about 2016. Because recently, I think I've done a lot of complaining about the back markers like, Sargeant, Zhou, Latifi, Mazepin, because I have to say, I think partly due to the pandemic and the fact that the junior series are so expensive to compete in nowadays, obviously. I mean, I know Franco Colapinto came out recently saying that his dad had to sell their house in Argentina just to fund his early career in Formula 4. Thankfully, it's paid off because I think Franco Colapinto is definitely 95% certain to end up at Sauber next year because, I mean, you'd be a fool not to sign that kid. Patrick Head was impressed by Keke Rosberg. That's an interesting one because I think Keke Rosberg actually ended up falling out with Patrick Head because I think Keke said that had he stayed at Williams in 1986 when Frank Williams had his accident, then he probably would have had a really hard season dealing with Patrick Head because I think by the end of 85, I think the relationship between Keke and Patrick had actually deteriorated quite a lot because Keke was very critical of the cars Williams designed after his championship winning year, like trying to like develop a car that could handle the raw horsepower of the Honda Turbo really made him angry, and he wasn't very impressed by the handling of the car and the fact he had to produce some amazing performances to win at Dallas, and I think, I don't know, win another couple of races in 1985 when, of course, I mean, Nigel Mansell joined the team, and I think Nigel Mansell ended up becoming number 1 over the year, so I mean, I've said it many times, the sport is full of rubbish, but you keep coming back. Well, yeah, tell me about it. Like, I thought I was going to quit watching F1 after Kimi retired, but I will say 2024 has been a huge improvement upon the last 2 seasons where, I've criticised Lando Norris a lot, but if it wasn't for him and if it wasn't for McLaren, and you have to realise they came into this season having no expectations of fighting with a championship. I think they've kind of actually rescued the sport to some extent because we've actually got something to talk about. Like, can Lando Norris actually win the championship? Like, even though obviously he's had the fastest car throughout the year, but I think in McLaren's heads mentally that they are ahead of schedule in terms of being able to compete for the championship again, because I think a lot of them, Zach Brown and Randy Singh, were expecting themselves to be back in contention for 2025, not this year. They're actually ahead of schedule, surprisingly enough. And I know Will F1, if you're still watching, I don't know, I think he's probably gone to bed, but was really surprised when I decided to start to change my opinion a bit after Lando won at Singapore. But I mean, I think this is the thing. Like, I think McLaren have been caught out by surprise by how quick their car has been, and I think having been a team known for celebrating podium, just mostly podium finishes once in a while, all of a sudden now they're like, I think they are kind of outperforming their own expectations, and I think Lando himself is a bit surprised by the opportunities that's been presented to him, and I think he's beginning to admit that he's having pre-race nerves and that he bogs down at the start because he realizes that he might not get another chance like this. I mean, I think if he does win the championship, then he'll probably start to calm down because all of a sudden he'll realize that no matter what happens after he wins the championship, he's always going to be a world champion no matter how many things goes wrong in his career. Oh, yeah, I know Zach Brown's been having all sorts of shenanigans with his IndyCar team, with Theo Porcher being annoyed when with how apparently the rumours that they wanted Alex Palou, and then apparently Chip Ganassi blocked it, and then Theo Porcher has been in and out of the seat in America, like, I find it so weird. Theo Porcher was hyped up as a potential world champion, and now he's struggling in America in IndyCar for McLaren, so swings and roundabouts. Yeah, but the thing is, the 2004 Ferrari was just so amazingly quick. Like, after such a fairly mixed 2003, I think Ferrari were actually quite rightly surprised by how quick the F2004 was, because I think with a car that was developed with the engine lasting the entire weekend, I think Ferrari expected the car to be a bit slower, but they got everything right. They got everything correct, and Williams, McLaren was caught out napping. I think they probably threw too many resources at 2003. And it saw Renault and BAR Honda leapfrog them in 2004. I think BAR Honda became the first ever team in F1 history to finish second in the Constructors' Championship without winning a race, which is quite incredible. But I think obviously having a driver like Takuma Sato was kind of held them back a bit in terms of maximising their car because they only got one podium. Jensen got 10 podiums, but I think Jensen's lack of outright speed did cost him in a couple of races that I think another driver like Alonso, Kimi, or Montoya might have won a race in. I mean, Renault did manage to win a race with Jarno Trulli at Monaco, but of course Trulli then got sacked a few races later after he got overtaken by Barrichello for third place, and then after that his relationship with Briatore fell apart dramatically. And he got replaced by none other than Jacques Villeneuve for the last three races, which was such a weird turn of fortunes. But yeah, I mean, I think I've ran out of things to say. Thank you for watching. Of course, I apologise if you're only just joining in now because I've been talking for more than an hour, and I've been doing this 3 nights in a row now. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't you worry. I think I'll be talking about Max Verstappen. And his future. Yeah, you take care, Rotten. You take care, Say, and everyone in the chat. Yeah, I'm quite tired. I think I'm gonna go to sleep. So thank you for coming to Crystal Racing. If you want to watch the playback, you can, because I've been talking for an hour and I don't want to repeat myself about the whole Mick Schumacher thing, as Yeah. Thank you, and over and out.